Most of us trust a doctor when we are sick. They're doctors, after all, having spent years of training for moments just like this. You show up, explain what's going on, and you trust whatever they say is happening to you and what's going to happen next. And if you don't, you go to a different doctor. But sometimes the call they make isn't the right one. Wrong medication, wrong diagnosis, whatever. Things can become catastrophic. Doctors are human, after all, and humans make mistakes. Sometimes, sadly, those mistakes can cost lives. And those are the kind of situations that can create what is known as residual hauntings or emotional imprints. An emotional haunting is when a place is associated with a strong emotional event. Fear, panic, grief, anger, all that energy sticks around. There's a reason why some hospitals are considered to be the most haunted places on Earth. And every now and then, that energy opens the door for something much darker.
Welcome to Down the Crooked Path. I'm your host, Amanda Joy. Join me as we dive into eerie and spine-chilling stories that blur the lines between reality and the unknown. From cryptids and mysterious disappearances to true crime, UFO sightings, and paranormal activity. Venture into the unknown and uncover the secrets that lie down the crooked path.
Do you know what iatrogenesis is? This is harm that comes from medical care itself. That means a disease, a complication, or any negative effect caused by a diagnosis, a treatment, or even negligence. This word has been around since 1924, but Ivan Illich brought it into sociology in 1976 when he argued that industrialized societies are over-medicalizing life. He points out that iatrogenesis isn't just physical, but it can also include mental suffering caused by medical beliefs or by what a practitioner says. Now, some iatrogenetic events are pretty obvious. Amputating the wrong limb is a pretty clear example, but some aren't so easy to spot, like a drug interaction that slips past anyone. In 2013, the estimate was 20 million negative effects from treatment worldwide. Back in 1990, that number was only around 94,000. Of course, iatrogenetic conditions don't always come from a mistake. Sometimes it's the treatment. A good example are radiation and chemotherapy. They are aggressive by design, and they come with an array of side effects, some more dangerous than others. Hair loss, anemia, diabetes, vomiting, nausea, brain damage, and infertility, just to name a few. The numbers that surround iatrogenesis can look misleading. A ruptured aortic aneurysm is usually fatal. The survival rate for treatment is under 25%. If a patient dies during or after the operation, it's counted as an iatrogenetic death, even though the procedure still offers a better chance than doing nothing at all. Now, all of this isn't to say that most of these situations aren't caused by negligence. A handwritten prescription gets misread. A patient is dismissed or brushed off due to prejudice about weight, gender, sexual orientation, immigration status, ethnicity, religion, and age. It's that kind of treatment that leads to mistrust, and people in some communities will often avoid care because of it, which leads to even more deaths. Ivan expanded the concept of iatrogenesis in his 1974 book, Medical Nemesis, The Expropriation of Health. He described 3 different levels. First is clinical iatrogenesis, which is injury from ineffective, unsafe, or erroneous treatments. He pointed out the need for medical-based medicine long before that term had ever even existed. Second is social iatrogenesis, where life becomes medicalized. Medical professionals, pharmaceutical companies, and device manufacturers promote sickness by creating unrealistic health demands or treating normal human experiences as disease. This leads to social harm and dependence on institutional care. Medical education contributes because physicians are trained to diagnose and treat illnesses, not focus on health. And of course, poverty is included in this as well. The third level is cultural iatrogenesis, where traditional ways of dealing with death, suffering, and sickness are replaced by a medical framework. People lose their own coping skills. Ulrich wasn't rejecting all the benefits of modern medicine, but he criticized the parts that create dependency and exploitation. Between 1990 and 2013, people who had died from adverse effects of medical treatment went up 51%. In the United States alone, estimated annual deaths include 12,000 from unnecessary surgeries, 7,000 from medication errors in hospitals, 20,000 from other hospital errors, 80,000 from hospital-acquired infections like MRSA, and 106,000 from non-error negative effects of drugs. Based on these figures, iatrogenesis may account for as many as 225,000 deaths per year in the United States, not counting recognizable error. And that brings us to today's story. It's 1905 in Atchison, Kansas. A few years earlier, the town had been a booming river town when railroads, lumber yards, and manufacturing plants were running hard. And while this area is a growing populated area, one thing it didn't have was a hospital, despite the fact that it had around 15,000 residents. A mother sits with her young daughter who has been ill for a few days. But tonight, her small body is burning hot with fever. She's complaining of stomach pains, and so the mother picks up her daughter, walks out of the house, and follows the cobblestone streets to the home of a local doctor. The doctor examines the young girl, a 6-year-old named Sallie, and he believes that she is suffering from appendicitis. In fact, her appendix is incredibly close to bursting. Waiting until morning to rush her to another town with a hospital isn't an option at this point. He prepared to operate right there in the house. He gave her an anesthetic, but in his urgency, he didn't wait long enough for the medication to take effect before he made his first incision. And the girl was awake enough to feel everything. She panics, screaming in terror. The doctor still continues with the procedure, but things quickly take a turn for the worst, and the girl bleeds out on the table and dies. The house in question was believed to have belonged to an Atchison physician named Dr. Charles C. Finley. From outside, it's a simple 2-story home, white with blue trim, similar to any other home that you would find on a quiet street. It was built sometime between 1867 and 1871 by a man named Michael Finney. However, he didn't live long after he finished the home, and he died in the house in 1971. For that, his son, Dr. Charles Finney, took over the property. He was one of the few doctors in Atchison at the time. Supposedly, his family lived upstairs, and the front room of the main floor doubled as his medical office. In the early 1900s, medical care looks very different than it does today. Family doctors kind of handled everything from fevers and injuries to childbirth and emergencies. Basically, whatever walked through the door. Towns like Atchison didn't have hospitals yet. Even with more than 15,000 people living there at the time, the city didn't get its first hospital until around 1914. And this brings our story forward to more recent times, the 1990s. 1992, Deborah and Tony Pickman were a newly married couple and expecting their first child. They came across a charming 100-year-old house that felt like the perfect fit for them. It had enough space and character. They were even able to turn one of the upstairs bedrooms into a nursery. For the first few months, everything seemed normal, but then a few odd things started to happen. Just simple things that could easily be shrugged off. Light bulbs would burn out faster than they should. The oven timer would turn on by itself. Their phone would go dead and then suddenly start working again. Now, this is a 100-year-old house after all, so these things can easily be explained by age or wiring. One thing, though, that they couldn't explain was the dog. He was normally very calm, but he would often stand in the doorway of the nursery and just growl, sometimes even bark like there was something inside the room. Then their son Taylor is born, and once he arrives, the strange occurrences become even harder to ignore. The first major incident happened not long after Taylor came home, and this event would mark the point where the Pickmans realized something was seriously wrong with this house. One evening, Tony walks into the nursery and he stops. All of Taylor's stuffed animals, which normally sat together on the chair, were now lined up on the floor in a neat little circle, each facing inward. Now, obviously this isn't how Tony had left them, so he thinks maybe his wife Deborah is playing a joke on him, but she says she didn't have anything to do with the toys. So they put everything back where it belonged, stepped out of the room, and when they returned a few minutes later, one of the bears was laying on the floor again. So they pick it up for a second time, leave the room again, and return again to find the bear back on the ground. Now, wanting a second pair of eyes on the situation, they ask a couple of friends to stay over. During this visit, the friends say that they watched a few of the stuffed animals shift and move as if someone was nudging or deliberately moving them. Another day, after being out for several hours, the Pickmans come home, go upstairs to settle the baby. When they open the nursery door, every stuffed animal that belonged on the chair is now stacked in a loose pile on the floor. Their first thought is that someone broke in. They search the house, find nothing, put the toys back, and lay Taylor down. Personally, I would think it's odd that someone would break into the house and only pile the stuffed animals in the middle of the room and not touch anything else, but maybe that's just me. As they head downstairs, the nursery light switched on. They ran back up and found one of the bears on the floor again. They checked the house a second time, found no one, and tried to talk themselves down. They put the bear back, turned the lights off again, and went downstairs. A few minutes later, Deborah looked in again, and the bear was back on the floor. Electronic toys would also turn on and off randomly. During one event, Deborah actually watched the wind-up mobile above little Taylor's bed start to play on its own. She would say that she could hear her son wake up sometimes in the middle of the night, almost hourly, and it would sound as if someone was in the room playing with him. Moving stuffies aside, something was also happening with Tony, although he wouldn't talk about it until years later. He was now having these terrifying, uncontrollable thoughts about hating Deborah and wanting to physically hurt her. In fact, the mere sight of her caused him intense rage. He even goes as far as describing having moments where he would black out. And Deborah would note that these urges were totally out of character for him, as he was deeply devoted and in love with her. There were even a few times where the couple believed Tony had been possessed. During one evening, he actually sat up in bed while sleeping, looked at Deborah, and in a strange voice said, "He's mine," before laying back down. He didn't remember any of this in the morning. The night after the stuffies, Tony and Deborah were out of ideas, so they called Tony's brother Larry, hoping he'd be able to come up with something maybe more practical as an explanation for what was happening. Larry wasn't the type who believed in the paranormal, so they figured he would walk in and point out something obvious and everyone could settle down. But when he got there, nothing. The house was quiet and the nursery looked normal. So they sat around for a while waiting for something to flicker or move or fall, but nothing. Larry even joked at one point that whatever they had been seeing was taking the night off. Then, just as he was getting ready to leave, they noticed something downstairs. A teddy bear that had always been facing the room was now turned towards the wall. They had all been upstairs just a moment earlier, and no one had touched it. Larry wasn't laughing anymore. He also didn't have an explanation, but he did have an idea. He knew someone whose sister worked as a psychic, and he would reach out to her and see if she had anything to offer. After Larry left, Tony called his mom to update her on what was going on. She offered them a place to stay for the night, but they decided to stay home and see what happened next. The following day, Tony's mom remembered something. A friend of hers had a daughter who once upon a time used to live in that same house. So his mom asked this friend if the daughter had ever had something strange happen there, and the woman said yes. As a matter of fact, there had been some weird things. There was this sour smell that would come on without warning, and toys that always seemed to end up on the floor. The friend said that her daughter would talk to the kids about what was happening, and they would always tell her that a little girl named Sallie was the one doing it. The mom had just assumed that her kid had an imaginary friend. Larry, meanwhile, got in touch with the psychic, a woman named Barbara, who lives in California. Even though she's never been to Kansas, she tells Larry that she can sense a young girl in the house somewhere between 5 and 13 years old, and that her name was Sallie. She said the little girl wasn't trying to hurt anyone. She liked the family, especially the baby, and just wanted to feel included. Now, this doesn't solve anything, but it did make the situation feel less threatening. The next day, Tony's brother, George, he comes by to hear the whole story. Tony shows him the bear downstairs, the same one that had turned around when Larry was there. They were talking about it when Tony picks up his camera and jokingly says, "Hey, Sallie, if you're here, say cheese." He presses the shutter and George watches the bear rotate. He yells out, and Tony bolts upstairs to go tell Deborah. George tries to follow, but halfway up the stairs, he froze. I'm talking his muscles locked, like something was holding him in place. A cold wave ran through him, and then, just as suddenly, he could move again. He ran upstairs after Tony, shaken and pale. After hearing what had happened with George and the bear, Tony and Deborah decided that there was no way they were staying in that house that night. So they grabbed the baby and headed to the car. While Tony is bent over in the car seat trying to buckle the baby in, he felt this sharp, burning pain across his back. Now, there was too much going on to stop and check in the driveway, so they just got into the car and drove to Tony's mom's house. Once they're there and things calmed down, Deborah lifted Tony's shirt to see what was wrong, and there are 3 long, deep scratches running down his back, deep enough that they broke skin and he is bleeding. Now, she knows that there's no way that he could have reached that spot himself. Now, you would think maybe they would move out at this point, but honestly, they're new parents who had just rented this place, and they didn't have the money to just start over somewhere else. The house itself was fine on paper. Whatever was happening inside the house was the problem. Larry is now really pushing the idea of calling the psychic again. He believed Barbara might have some ideas as to what they can do. So Barbara speaks with the Pickmans over the phone, and she tells them that since the activity is coming from a child, they need to treat it like a child. Set the rules the same way that you would with any other child. She tells them to walk through the house and speak loudly and basically explain what is allowed and what isn't. So that night, Tony and Deborah, they start going from room to room. They spoke in a calm, normal voice and laid out the rules. The toys stay put where they are. The lights stay off unless someone turns them on. No one in the house wants to be startled. Keep in mind, this is not some sort of ritual. It's not like they're walking around with sage or saying prayers or Bible verses. It's literally just them talking out loud. After this, for a short while, things do settle down. The nursery is quiet. The stuffies stay where they are supposed to. Even the dog has stopped growling at the doorway of the nursery. The house was quiet enough that they could get through an evening without feeling on edge. But then, the activity started focusing more on Tony. Tony actually feels sort of threatened by this spirit or whatever it is. Deborah, meanwhile, is leaning hard into the idea that Sallie is a child who needs attention. Barbara eventually offers to come to Atchison and see the house in person. She flew in from California a couple of nights later. After walking through the rooms, she told Tony and Deborah that she could see Sallie and described her as a young girl who just wanted to be a part of their family. She also said that Sallie didn't like men. She believed Sallie may have been hurt by a man when she was alive, but she wasn't certain. In her view, the scratches on Tony weren't meant to seriously harm him. She said Sallie acted out of anxiety and excitement, especially when the family tried to leave. She then goes on to say that they shouldn't ignore Sallie. She says that they should acknowledge her, talk to her, and include her, and that might calm things down. Deborah, she takes this advice seriously. She starts talking to Sallie more and giving her praise. She claims that she can actually feel cold spots next to her while she's talking to Sallie, and assumes that the ghost girl is trying to cuddle with her. Deborah even goes as far as buying Sallie a doll, wrapping it like a present, and left it on the chair. Later, when she went to check in the room, the doll was out of the wrapping and sitting in Taylor's crib. The box and the paper were still untouched where she had left them. From this point on, Deborah started treating Sallie more like a child in the house. But when Tony said that he felt uncomfortable or targeted, she just brushed it off and said he was reading too much into things. Deborah is settling into a mother-type role for this entity. Tony's experiences in the house moved in the opposite direction. Whatever was happening there, it was kind of aimed at him. Tony started hearing whispers around the house. Deborah couldn't hear them. Now, at first, they were voices, just faint. they would come from another room. Over the next several months, they grew louder. Eventually, it sounded like several people talking all at the same time, all of them overlapping, so much that Tony couldn't make out a single word. He also started hearing scratches inside the walls. Sometimes it sounded close, sometimes it sounded far away, like something was moving around behind the plaster. By October, he began feeling something nibbling at his toes. It didn't hurt, but it was often enough that he couldn't ignore it. And when he told Deborah, she just said Sallie was trying to get his attention. On Halloween morning, Tony came home from work and saw a little girl standing in the kitchen. At first, he thought she was a neighbor kid who had wandered into the house, but then he noticed her clothes. She was wearing an old-fashioned white lace dress with puffy sleeves, and her brown hair was tied with a bow. She had large blue eyes and was staring right at him. The sight startled him enough that he dropped the glass he was holding, and when he looked back up, she was gone. Now, at this point, Tony is admitting that she looked like a child. But the activity in the house was not harmless. One night, they had friends over for dinner. Someone at the table noticed that Tony's forehead was bleeding. They all watched as a long scratch appeared across his skin, even though nothing was touching him. The physical attacks continued. Tony had dreams where he was being dragged out of bed by the wrists. It felt real enough that he woke up in panic. And when he looked at his arms the next morning, he had blisters around his wrists in the shape of small fingerprints. Another time, Tony saw a woman walking down the hall. Now, at first he thinks it was Deborah and followed her into one of the bedrooms. When he stepped inside, though, the room was empty, and he found Deborah in another part of the house. And she wasn't even dressed, so he knew that the woman he followed wasn't her. After this, Tony tells Barbara that he's seeing this woman, and she tells him that there's another spirit in the house, an older woman with a controlling personality, and she doesn't believe that this spirit is connected to Sallie. These encounters with the older woman start becoming more intense. One night, Tony woke up and saw her standing over him, dressed in black. The entire room shook. She told him she was going to kill him. And just as she reached towards him, he woke up in bed. Deborah hadn't heard a thing. Tony's trying to explain what's happening, but Deborah continues to say that he's exhausted from taking care of the baby and that lack of sleep could make anyone see or hear things. She doesn't apply that explanation, though, to her own experiences. Anything gentle or childlike, she believed. Anything violent or frightening, she said couldn't be Sallie. Eventually, Tony just stops telling her anything. They lived in a very conservative town, and he didn't feel comfortable talking about this with anyone else. Deborah had been the only person he could confide in, and now she didn't believe him. When they took Christmas photos, an odd blur showed up in the prints. They had sent the picture to Barbara, and she told them that the blur was the older woman that Tony had seen in the hallway. But by this point, it's getting harder for Tony to believe that any of this is just harmless. The activity in the house has gotten so bad that it's now affecting baby Taylor, who has been startled awake in the middle of the night more often with a sharp, sudden shriek. And this isn't the cry a baby makes when it wants attention. This is a full-on terror scream. As Taylor is becoming more unsettled, Deborah hears one of the toys in the nursery turn on by itself. It's a recorder meant to capture the baby's voice and play it back, but instead, it produces this loud burst of static. The sound was harsh enough that it even hurt her ears. She had been in the room just minutes earlier and hadn't heard a thing that could have triggered it. There are other problems happening in the house as well. Candles around the house begin lighting themselves. Deborah tries to stop it by speaking out loud and telling Sallie that she needs to stop this because she could burn the whole house down. But the fires didn't stop. Before long, other objects were catching fire on their own, including an oil lamp and even one of the teddy bears. One afternoon, Tony tried to take a nap in the bedroom. As he lay there, he notices the dust in the air starts to gather in one spot. The dust pulled together until it formed the shape of an old woman dressed in black with her hair piled on top of her head. As she moves closer to him, the entire room starts shaking. The dresser is rattling. The mattress shook beneath him. The door slammed shut. The woman reached out a hand. She was wearing a black lace glove, and her hand stopped just inches from his face. She said, "I'm going to," but before she could finish the sentence, a black bird appeared on her finger. Tony tried to crawl off the bed and get to the door, but he couldn't open it, and the shaking is continuing. Just as he's sure that she's about to grab him, he woke back up on the bed. The room was still. The door was open. Deborah, of course, had heard none of this, not even the slamming door. By this point, word about the activity in the Pickman house has spread. A producer from the TV show Sightings has reached out after hearing about the case through Barbara's lectures. They want to film an episode in Atchison. Tony agrees, hoping that someone outside the family might finally witness what's happening. The Sightings crew arrived on July of 1994. Within minutes of setting up their equipment, they saw something that they couldn't explain. While Barbara is being interviewed, Tony was scratched on the arm by something no one could see. Later, during his own interview, he was scratched again across the stomach. The crew kept the cameras on him for 9 straight minutes as the marks slowly appeared on his skin. Over the course of one night of filming, Tony was attacked 11 separate times. By the end of it, he was covered in welts and scratches. A parapsychologist on the team said that he had never seen anything like this in his career. One of the scratches on Tony's back formed the letters MC. Deborah, she's already done some investigation of her own and learned that the house was built around 1871 by an Irish immigrant named Michael Croman Finney. The initials matched his first and middle name. Finney had died in the house the year after it was built, leaving behind 2 sons and a daughter. One of those sons, Charles, later became a doctor who lived in the home for a time. The Sightings crew brought in a psychic who said that he could sense a doctor had in fact once lived there. He also said that there was a young girl named Sallie in the house who may have died of pneumonia or had been a patient of the doctor. He couldn't quite tell. He believed that she was trapped in the home ever since. Also sensed a darker presence. The crew followed him into a cemetery where he pointed out the grave of a woman named Sallie Isabel Hall, who died in 1905. When they looked into it, they found that she had been 34 years old, so this didn't match the description of the spirit in the house. Apart from the name, there was no connection. Sightings filmed 4 full episodes in the house, but couldn't explain what was happening. If anything, the activity seemed to intensify during and after their visits. Other investigative teams followed years later, including the team from Travel Channel, Discovery Channel, SYFY, and A&E. The recording equipment had failures, objects moved on their own, sudden cold spots. People could feel touched when no one was near them. Several trained guide dogs refused to enter the nursery, even when commanded to. After the Sightings crew left for the final time, Tony finally felt like he had enough evidence to convince Deborah that something was seriously wrong. Around this time, a medium offered to cleanse the house, and the Pickmans agreed. Before the cleansing began, the medium asked if they wanted any of the spirits to stay. Deborah chose Sallie to stay. Even after all that had happened, she didn't want to send this ghost girl away. This medium said that she could sense 3 spirits in the house: a little girl, an older woman with a threatening presence, and a 3rd spirit that she described as a perfect gentleman. The cleansing began, and it didn't go well. In the middle of it, Tony was attacked again. By the end of the ceremony, he had 8 deep scratches across his back, and the activity didn't calm down afterwards. In fact, it escalated. Tony's mental state is deteriorating. He's exhausted, on edge, hearing voices constantly. For months, he has not been able to understand what they're saying. Now, he could. The voices were clear, and they were telling him to do things. Violent things. One morning, Tony was alone in the house when a stray cat wandered into the kitchen and began drinking milk from a bowl of cereal he had left out. Something about the sight sent him into a rage. He grabbed a butcher knife and killed the cat. When it was over, he sat down on the couch with the bowl in his hands. The only thought in his mind was that Deborah was next. Not long after that, Tony was pushed at the top of the stairs. The force was strong enough that he broke the railing, but he didn't fall all the way down. After this, he called Deborah from the house and told her what had happened and that he was not safe there. For the first time, something broke through her denial. She could no longer treat the activities as a harmless, playful little girl. Whatever was in the house was not a child looking for attention. It was dangerous, and 2 weeks later, the Pickmans finally moved out. Obviously, Tony had reached that conclusion first. The scratches that appeared on his body, the voices that he heard, the violent thoughts that came out of nowhere, and the moments where he lost control all align with what is described as demonic possession. The Catholic Church teaches that these kinds of attacks often target people who are religious or vulnerable, and Tony believed he kind of fit both those categories. Deborah also thinks that she wasn't spared. She believed that the same force influenced her as well. She says that it made her indifferent to the things that were happening to her husband, something that she still struggles with when she looks back on that time. They do not think that the house contained only one entity. They believe Sallie and the older women are spirits of people who died there, and that something was using them. In their view, a demon held other spirits in place and used them to draw people in. They point to Deborah's early attachment to Sallie as an example of this. Sallie seemed harmless, even endearing, which made it easy for Deborah to overlook the darker activity happening around Tony. By the time either of them realized something more serious was happening, the damage was already done. Even though the Pickmans left the house, they believed that the spirits did not. After moving out, the Pickmans realized that the experiences hadn't ended for them as well. Tony told Deborah that something still felt attached to him. It wasn't a specific voice or shape, just a constant sense that something from the house had followed him. Those feelings have never gone away. Both Tony and Deborah continue to have severe nightmares. They were vivid and disturbing and stay with them long after hours of waking. Tony has also dealt with constant anxiety and the sense that something is watching him. Even though they've moved, there are still physical events happening as well. Tony had woke on the couch one night and found his clothes on fire. Another time, he saw a butcher knife fly across the room and miss his face by inches. He also felt pulled towards the old house that he couldn't explain. One night, he woke up standing in front of the Sallie House after walking almost 10 blocks through the snow in his sleep. And they're not the only ones who had problems after leaving. Some visitors have said something followed them home as well. They describe seeing movement out of the corner of their eye or feeling watched for weeks or months afterwards. The house itself didn't stay empty either. A few tenants moved in, but none of them stayed long. One tenant said that she saw a little girl and moved out the week after. By 2004, the house was vacant again. Because of the attention from sightings and other shows, the owner turned it over to the Chamber of Commerce. Today, people can book tours or stay overnight. Guests have even brought their own sleeping bags, and they're not allowed to perform seances or try to cleanse the house. Visitors report hearing voices, footsteps, laughter, and children giggling. Some say that they felt someone touch them, but no one was near them. Others talk about sudden cold spots or equipment shutting off without warning. Many bring audio recorders and leave with sounds that they believe are voices. One EVP specialist claimed to identify 17 different voices in the house. The Pickmans tell people to stay away. They believe that the house can pull people in the same way that it pulled them in. The warnings haven't stopped tours, though. The Sallie House is still one of the most talked about places in Atchison, and for some people, the experiences do not end when they walk out the door. Now, when it comes to the story of Sallie, well, there are some things that really don't add up. For one, there are no death records, no census entries, and nothing in location documents showing that a little girl named Sallie ever lived or died in Atchison during the time frame that these stories claim. Keep in mind, this is the early 1900s, and record keeping wasn't exactly reliable back then, so that doesn't really mean much. But the medical details of the story also don't match the timeline either. The legend says that Dr. Charles Finney operated on a young girl in the house around 1905 to 1910. In reality, Finney had trained in the Missouri Pacific Railway Hospital, earning his medical degree in 1894, and ran his practice out of the Martin Building downtown. There is nothing showing that he ever used the house as a surgical space. By 1905, the house itself was being rented out to other families. There is no record of any emergency surgery ever happening there. The legend also says that he used the main floor for his medical practice and the family lived upstairs, but the layout of the house kind of tells a different story as well. The story of Sallie doesn't appear anywhere in Atchison history before the 1990s. It surfaced only after psychics and investigators began visiting the Pickmans. The details about her age, appearance, and death all came from readings, recordings, and not any documented history. There's also kind of the issue of the activity in the house. The scratches, fires, violent dreams, and the physical attacks don't seem like the behavior of a frightened 6-year-old child. Many investigators believe that the name Sallie may have been a convenient identity for something else in the house to use. Locally, there are some theories about where the Sallie story came from. Atchison markets itself as the most haunted town in Kansas. Some residents believe that the Sallie narrative was encouraged, or at least heavily embellished, to support tourism. The house is now a paid attraction where visitors can book tours and overnight stays, and the legend itself has become a part of the city's economy. And I mean, this kind of makes the most sense. During the 1990s, paranormal shows were becoming really popular, and for almost 100 years, no one ever reported haunting-like or paranormal activity within the house. Ethel Anderson owned and lived in the home from 1958 to 1990. Until her death in 2000, she said that the house was not haunted. In fact, she was adamant about it. The Pickmans were the first people to report any activity at all. For a house with such a dramatic legend, that gap is kind of hard to ignore. With what we know, there is no evidence that Sallie was a real child. The story is a mix of folklore, psychic interpretations, and experiences of people who lived in the house. Whatever the Pickmans encountered doesn't match the life or death of any documented little girl in Atchison. Or maybe there's a darker force just trying to convince us that's what it is. The power of fear and the human's mind ability to manifest physical symptoms cannot be underestimated. Remember, sometimes the most frightening things are those that lurk within our own minds. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and allow the mysteries to guide you. This is Amanda Joy, signing off. Follow the path further. If this episode left you lingering in the shadows, there's more to explore. Follow at Down the Crooked Path on TikTok and Instagram for haunting visuals, behind-the-scenes lore, and updates on upcoming episodes. Every post is another breadcrumb deeper into the strange, the forgotten, and the beautifully unsettling. Stay curious and keep walking.